Hey everyone, relationships, they can get kind of complicated sometimes, right?
Right.
I mean, we all want those connections that feel safe and fulfilling, but how to get there? Well, that's not always clear.
Yeah, for sure.
So today we're diving into this guide all about spotting those unhealthy patterns in relationships and, you know, building stronger, healthier ones.
Cool.
We're going to pull out those like key takeaways, and actionable
Mhm.
insights to help you create those fulfilling relationships everyone deserves.
I like that, tackling both sides of it, like what's not working, but also how to build something better, those building blocks.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's a lot to cover here.
Absolutely. And this guy just jumps right in,
Okay.
emphasizing safety right off the bat. It's like step one, you're feeling unsafe in a relationship. Trust your gut.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't question yourself or downplay those feelings.
That's huge. It's easy to explain away those icky feelings,
Yeah.
especially when you care about someone.
Right.
But that little voice inside us, usually it's trying to tell us something important.
Exactly. And the guide really stresses this.
Mm.
If you're feeling threatened, you need to create physical distance.
Mm-hmm.
Get out of the situation immediately.
And that's where a safety plan can be a game changer.
Yeah.
Knowing how to get out, having a code word with friends or family, packing a bag with essentials,
Yeah?
medications, documents, that kind of thing.
Right.
Those preparations can make all the difference when you're stressed out like that,
For sure.
at a tough spot.
Absolutely. And they even suggest like a backup charging cable stashed somewhere,
Mhm.
easy to grab,
Oh, smart.
just in case. Because a charge phone can be a lifeline.
Totally, in an emergency.
Right.
Yeah, speaking of lifelines, this guide makes it clear you don't have to go through this alone.
Right.
It really pushes reaching out for support,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a friend, family member, or, those hotlines organizations specifically for this.
Yeah, it mentions the National Domestic Violence Hotline,
Oh, good.
1-800-799-7233. And they also mentioned the website, thehotline.org.
Great resource.
Yeah.
It's important to remember reaching out. That's strength, not weakness.
Right.
Sometimes just talking to someone who gets it can give you the perspective and support you need.
Absolutely. And beyond, like those immediate friends and family, the guide encourages professional help too.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
A therapist can provide a safe space, confidential,
Yeah. Yeah.
to process your emotions, work on coping mechanisms, and, maybe even uncover those deeper patterns that are contributing to the unhealthy relationship stuff.
Right. And if you're dealing with legal things, like needing a protective order,
Oh, right.
the guide recommends getting legal help too.
Having that professional guidance can make navigating all that so much easier.
Yeah.
Less overwhelming, more empowering.
For sure.
Now the guide doesn't just focus on escaping unhealthy situations.
Right.
It dives into recognizing those red flags in the first place.
And this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
The different forms of abuse,
Yeah.
it goes beyond just physical.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about emotional, financial, sexual, even technological abuse.
It's eye-opening how abuse can show up in all these subtle ways, know?
Yeah.
And I appreciate that the guide doesn't just give a vague list of signs.
Yeah.
It gives specific examples for each category.
Yeah, like they talk about gaslighting as a tactic in emotional abuse,
Oh, yeah.
trying to make you doubt your own sanity by twisting the truth or denying reality.
So manipulative because it undermines your sense of self.
Right.
Like, can you even trust your own perception anymore?
Totally. And then for financial abuse,
Mm-hmm.
they give the example of being denied access to bank accounts or forced to hand over control of your finances.
Ugh, that's all about power and control, just straight up.
It is.
Can be so isolating and disempowering
For sure.
for the person going through it.
Absolutely. And then for sexual abuse,
Okay.
the guide talks about being pressured or coerced into sexual acts you don't want.
Right.
It's a reminder that consent is essential in any healthy sexual relationship.
Absolutely. Consent has to be freely given, enthusiastic, and ongoing. Any pressure or coercion crosses the line.
Totally. And lastly, for technological abuse,
Okay.
they paint a picture of someone constantly monitoring your emails, social media accounts.
Ugh, that's creepy.
It is.
A total invasion of privacy, another way to control someone.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that abuse can take many forms.
Yeah.
And it's important to be aware of those red flags online and offline.
It really is in all parts of our lives. Now, what I found interesting is the guide then shifts gears
Okay.
and talks about the challenge of figuring out relationship dynamics.
Okay, so how do we tell the difference between a disinterested partner, a selfish partner, and someone who might actually be a narcissist?
Right.
And it acknowledges that these labels get thrown around a lot.
They do.
which can be confusing.
It's like we need a decoder ring to figure out the subtle but important differences.
Right.
So how does the guide break it down?
It dives into each profile,
Okay.
highlighting the key characteristics
Mm-hmm.
and motivations behind those behaviors.
I see.
And it emphasizes that it's not just about isolated incidents,
Right.
but recurring patterns and understanding the overall impact on the relationship.
That makes sense, connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly.
So let's start with the disinterested partner. What are some of the signs?
The guide paints a picture of someone who's apathetic, not engaged.
Okay.
They might avoid deep conversations, seem distracted, withdrawn, and just generally don't prioritize the relationship.
Like they've emotionally checked out.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the guide suggests that often it's not about malice.
Oh, really?
It might stem from a loss of romantic or emotional connection, boredom,
Okay.
or just fundamental incompatibility.
So not necessarily trying to hurt the other person,
Right. More about a lack of investment or effort.
but even if it's not intentional, that impact can still hurt.
Oh, absolutely.
The other person might end up feeling undervalued, neglected, or like they're not a priority.
Right. Like they're not being seen or heard.
Yeah, that can be really lonely and frustrating in a relationship.
Absolutely.
So how is that different from a selfish partner?
Well, with a selfish partner, things shift a bit.
Okay.
The guide explains that a selfish partner consistently puts their own needs first, desires, interests, often at the expense of their partner's well-being.
So less about lack of interest, more about a self-centered approach.
Exactly. It's like their world revolves around them and everyone else is just orbiting their needs.
Oh, wow.
They might make one-sided decisions, disregard your feelings, or constantly expect you to cater to their whims.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be.
For the other person.
It is. And what's interesting is the guide suggests that this selfishness might stem from a lack of self-awareness or emotional immaturity, rather than a deliberate intention to manipulate or control.
So they might not even realize the impact of their actions.
Exactly. And because of that, the guide suggests that sometimes with open communication and a willingness to reflect, a selfish partner can actually be guided to recognize their behavior and make adjustments.
That's hopeful.
It is.
So any specific signs someone might be doing with a selfish partner?
The guide mentions resistance to compromise as a key indicator.
Okay.
It's like their way is the only way, and any suggestion of doing things differently is met with resistance or even anger.
That lack of flexibility and that inability to see things from another perspective.
Right.
And I imagine that can lead to a lot of resentment and conflict over time.
No, absolutely. And it's important to remember that this pattern of selfishness can be deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
So we might take a lot of work and commitment to change those dynamics.
Right.
Now, this is where it gets really complex. The narcissist.
Narcissism. It's such a loaded term.
It is.
And often misunderstood. So how does the guide approach this?
It starts by laying out the hallmark characteristics.
Okay.
A persistent pattern of grandiosity, an insatiable need for admiration, and a profound lack of empathy.
That sounds like a recipe for a very imbalanced relationship.
It can be incredibly damaging.
Yeah.
The guide emphasizes that narcissists might resort to manipulation, gaslighting, or even exploitation to maintain control or fuel their inflated sense of self-importance.
So it's not just being self-centered.
Right.
It's actively using those tactics to get their needs met,
Right.
often at the expense of their partner.
Exactly. And the guide suggests that the motivation behind this behavior is often rooted in deep-seated insecurity.
Interesting.
It's like they have this fragile ego they need to protect at all costs, even if it means hurting others.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
It is.
This outward confidence and superiority masking a deep well of insecurity
Really.
and vulnerability.
And the impact of being in a relationship with a narcissist can be devastating.
Yeah.
The guide talks about how it can lead to emotional exhaustion, confusion, a diminished sense of self-worth, and even trauma.
So how can someone recognize those red flags early on and protect themselves?
One of the most striking signs the guide mentions is a consistent pattern of manipulation or emotional abuse.
Okay.
Think gaslighting, love bombing, where they shower you with affection early on, followed by devaluation and criticism.
Oh, wow.
It's like a roller coaster of emotions designed to keep you off balance and hooked.
It's that classic cycle of abuse.
It is.
So hard to break free from.
It is. And it's important to remember the person experiencing this isn't to blame.
Right.
And another red flag is extreme sensitivity to criticism.
Okay.
Narcissists can dish it out, but they can't take it.
Right.
Any feedback, even if it's constructive, is seen as a personal attack.
Yeah.
And it'll often deflect or retaliate.
Their ego is so fragile.
Yeah.
They can't handle any criticism.
And perhaps the most concerning sign of all is a lack of genuine accountability or empathy. Narcissists rarely take responsibility for their actions or acknowledge the pain they've caused.
It's always someone else's fault.
Always. That lack of empathy is often what makes narcissistic behaviors so resistant to change.
Yeah.
They just can't understand or relate to the pain they're inflicting.
I can't see it.
The guide really hammers home the point that recognizing these patterns early on is crucial.
So important.
It's about trusting your gut and paying attention to those red flags.
Right.
And if you find yourself questioning whether someone's behavior is crossing a line, it's always a good idea to reach out for support and guidance.
Having that outside perspective can really help you gain clarity.
Yeah.
And make informed decisions about your own well-being.
For sure.
And speaking of well-being, the guide takes a hopeful turn.
Okay.
And starts exploring those principles of healthy relationships.
Awesome.
It acknowledges that entering or re-entering the dating world can feel overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
Especially after experiencing those unhealthy patterns.
Right.
But it offers a powerful message of hope.
Okay.
We are all products of our environment, but we don't have to remain slaves to it.
That's powerful.
We have the power to break free from those cycles, to learn, grow, and create healthier, more fulfilling relationships.
I love that. And to guide us on that journey, the guide dives into 15 core principles of healthy relationships. 15.
Wow.
These are the building blocks.
Okay.
For those strong, lasting connections we all crave.
15 principles. That's quite a list.
It is.
Are they all equally important, or are there some that stand out as being like really foundational?
They do touch on all of them, but they also suggest focusing on a handful of the most essential ones, those that really set the stage for a healthy dynamic.
Okay, break it down into manageable pieces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore those key principles.
Awesome.
And uncover those actionable insights that can help us create those fulfilling and lasting connections.
I can't wait to unpack those principles.
Yeah.
And see how they can be applied to real-life relationships. It sounds like this guide is packed with valuable insights.
Oh, this is.
For anyone looking to create healthier, more fulfilling connections.
Absolutely.
So we have to talking about those 15 principles of healthy relationships.
Right. 15.
Where do we even begin with a list that long?
I know it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
So the guide suggests focusing on a few that really form the bedrock.
Okay.
Like the cornerstones that support everything else.
Makes sense. Break it down into manageable pieces.
Right.
So what's the first principle they highlight?
Well, right off the bat, mutual respect.
Okay.
They explain that it's about valuing each other's individuality, respecting boundaries, and being open to different perspectives. It's recognizing your partner is their own person with their own thoughts, feelings, experiences.
Right.
Just as valid as yours.
That feels fundamental.
It is.
It's about honoring each other's inherent worth. Not trying to mold them into some ideal version we have in our heads.
Exactly. And the guide points out that respect goes beyond just agreeing all the time. It's about treating each other with kindness and consideration, even during disagreements.
So disagreements aren't necessarily a bad thing.
Not at all. They're bound to happen in any relationship.
Right.
The key is how you handle them.
I see.
And the guide's actionable tip for practicing mutual respect is active listening.
That sounds simple enough.
It does.
But I imagine it's harder than it seems.
You're right. It's about truly hearing your partner, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Right.
Putting aside your own judgments and distractions and really trying to understand their perspective.
It's like that saying, seek to understand before being understood.
Yeah.
Creating that space for open and honest communication.
And speaking of communication, that's the next principle. The guide dives into open communication.
Okay.
They stress the importance of creating a space where both partners feel safe expressing their thoughts, feelings, and needs, even when it's difficult.
That vulnerability can be scary.
It can be.
But it's essential for building trust and intimacy.
It is. And open communication isn't just about talking. It's about actively listening.
Right.
It's about that reciprocal flow where both partners feel heard and understood.
It sounds like those two principles, mutual respect and open communication,
Yeah.
they really go hand in hand.
They do. They're like the dynamic duo of healthy relationships.
I like that.
And to put open communication into practice.
Okay.
The guide suggests a simple but powerful tip. Schedule dedicated time for heart-to-heart conversations.
That's a great idea.
It is.
In the whirlwind of daily life, it's easy to let those meaningful conversations slide.
Yeah.
But scheduling dedicated time shows your partner you value their thoughts and feelings.
It's like creating a sacred space for connection, free from distractions.
I love that.
Now on to another foundational principle, trust and honesty.
Those are non-negotiables in any healthy relationship.
They are.
Without trust, you're building on shaky ground.
Exactly. And the guide breaks trust down into being truthful and dependable. Keeping your promises and avoiding behaviors that erode trust, like lying, cheating, or hiding things.
It's about being someone your partner can rely on.
Right.
Someone who consistently shows up with integrity and authenticity.
And the guide stresses that trust is earned over time, not given freely.
Right, it's not a given.
It's about consistently proving your trustworthiness through your actions, not just your words.
It's about building that foundation of security and reliability so both partners feel safe and supported. What's their actionable tip for building trust?
They suggest practicing transparency,
Okay.
being open and honest about your thoughts, feelings, and actions.
That can be tough.
It can be.
But it's also incredibly powerful.
It is.
For deepening connection and understanding.
Right.
Now, this next principle might seem a bit counterintuitive when we're talking about building strong connections, independence.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But the guide makes a good point.
Oh.
Healthy independence means maintaining your own sense of self, pursuing your own passions, having a life outside the relationship.
So it's not about becoming completely enmeshed with each other.
Not at all. It's about recognizing that you're a complete individual, even within a partnership,
Right.
and that bringing your whole self to the table actually enriches the relationship.
It's about enhancing each other's lives, not consuming them.
Exactly. And this independence isn't about being distant. It's about finding a healthy balance
Okay.
between togetherness and individuality.
Makes sense. What's their practical tip for cultivating this healthy independence?
It's something we often forget in the midst of relationships. Prioritize self-care.
Self-care, the foundation of well-being.
It is.
But how does taking care of yourself translate into a healthier relationship?
The guide emphasizes that when you prioritize your physical, emotional, and mental well-being, you're better equipped to show up as your best self in the relationship.
Oh, I see.
You have more energy, patience, and compassion to give.
It's like filling up your own cup, so you have something to pour from.
Okay, this next principle feels particularly important in the context of what we were discussing earlier about recognizing those red flags. Healthy boundaries.
Absolutely. The guide defines healthy boundaries as understanding and respecting each other's limits, physical, emotional, and mental.
Right. It's about knowing what you're comfortable with, what you're not, and communicating those limits clearly.
And they emphasize that boundaries aren't about controlling your partner.
Right.
They're about creating a safe and respectful space for both individuals to thrive.
Exactly. So what's the key to establishing healthy boundaries?
Well, communication seems key.
It is. The guide suggests having open and honest conversations about your needs and limits.
That can be a tough conversation,
It can be.
but so important for setting the stage for a respectful dynamic.
It is, and it's an ongoing process, not a one-time thing.
Right.
Boundaries can shift and evolve as the relationship grows.
Makes sense.
So it's important to check in with each other regularly.
It's about creating that open dialogue where both partners feel comfortable expressing their needs and respecting those boundaries.
Now, this next principle is all about creating a sense of partnership and shared responsibility.
Equality.
Equality, that's powerful, especially within the context of relationships.
It is.
What does that look like in practice?
The guide explains that it means both partners contribute equally to the relationship,
Okay.
whether it's decision-making, emotional support, or effort. It's recognizing both individuals have equal worth and value.
So it's not about keeping score or tallying up who does more.
Right.
It's about a shared sense of responsibility and contribution.
Exactly. And this equality extends to all areas: finances, household tasks, emotional labor decision-making.
It's about creating that sense of partnership where both individuals feel seen, heard, and valued for their contributions.
Yes. What's the actionable tip for fostering this sense of equality?
I'm not sure.
The guide suggests regularly checking in with each other about how you're both feeling in the relationship. Those check-ins can be so valuable for staying connected
They can.
and addressing any imbalances that might be creeping in.
Right.
It's about ensuring both partners feel they have an equal voice and that their needs are being addressed.
Exactly. And sometimes achieving that balance might require adjustments and compromises from both sides.
That's where that flexibility and willingness to adapt come in.
Yeah.
Recognizing that relationships are a constant work in progress, and it takes effort from both sides to maintain that sense of equality and balance.
It does.
So we've covered 6 principles so far.
We have.
What else does the guide highlight as essential for a healthy, fulfilling relationship?
Well, this next one is all about cultivating understanding and connection. Empathy.
Empathy is so powerful. It's that ability to step into someone else's shoes and see the world through their eyes, even if you don't agree with their perspective.
Exactly. And the guide explains empathy is about making a genuine effort to understand your partner's feelings, even when it's challenging. It's about putting aside your own judgments and trying to connect with their emotional experience.
It's about recognizing their feelings are valid, even if you don't fully understand them. Sometimes empathy is less about offering solutions and more about simply listening with compassion.
Absolutely. And to help us practice empathy, the guide suggests a technique called reflective listening.
Reflective listening.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that before.
It's about mirroring back what you hear your partner saying, both verbally and non-verbally.
Okay.
Like holding up a mirror to their emotions so they feel seen and heard.
So instead of jumping in with advice or trying to fix their problems,
Right.
you're simply reflecting back their feelings to show you understand and care.
Exactly. The guide suggests using phrases like, "It sounds like you're feeling,"
Okay.
or "I hear you saying," to validate their experience.
It's a simple but powerful way to show you're present and engaged with their emotional world.
It is.
What's next on the list of essential principles?
This one's all about long-term compatibility. Shared values and goals.
Okay.
While it's normal to have some differences aligning on core principles like honesty, family, career aspirations, lifestyle choices can make for a smoother and more fulfilling journey as a couple.
It's like having a shared compass pointing you in the same direction.
It is.
But how do you know if you're truly aligned on those values?
The guide suggests having open and honest conversations about your individual aspirations
Okay.
and how those align or perhaps diverge as you move through life together. It's an ongoing process of checking in and making sure you're still moving in a direction that feels good for both of you.
So it's not about having identical dreams,
Right.
but about making sure those dreams are compatible and supportive of each other.
Exactly. And to nurture this shared vision, the guide offers a fun tip. Create a couple's bucket list.
Okay, I like that.
Brainstorm dreams and aspirations, big and small,
Yeah.
and find ways to weave them into your lives together.
I love that it's about creating those shared experiences and memories that strengthen your bond and keep the spark alive.
Absolutely. Now, this next principle feels especially relevant in today's world, where things are constantly changing. Flexibility and adaptability.
So important. The guide reminds us that relationships like life are always evolving.
Right.
And being open to growth and change, both individually and as a couple, is essential for navigating transitions and challenges.
It is. So it's about letting go of that rigid need for control and embracing the unpredictable nature of life and love.
It is.
Being willing to adapt, compromise, and find new ways to connect as you grow and change together.
And the guide suggests a helpful practice for cultivating flexibility: regular check-ins.
Those check-ins seem to be a recurring theme in these principles.
They do.
It's about creating that space for ongoing dialogue, addressing any issues that might be brewing, and making sure both partners feel heard and understood.
Okay, what's next on the list?
Well, this one's about dealing with the inevitable bumps in the road. Conflict resolution skills. Okay, the guide stresses that healthy conflict resolution isn't about avoiding disagreements.
Right.
It's about addressing them constructively
Yeah.
without blame, criticism, or shutting down.
It's about shifting that mindset from winning the argument
Right.
to finding solutions that work for both partners.
Exactly. And to navigate conflicts effectively, the guide suggests a communication technique called I statements.
I statements.
Yeah.
Tell me more about those.
I statements help you express your feelings and needs without blaming or attacking your partner.
Okay.
Instead of saying, "You always do this,"
Right.
you could say, "I feel hurt when this happens."
It takes the focus off attacking and puts it on expressing your own experience.
It does. It creates a more empathetic and understanding dynamic, even in the midst of disagreement.
I see.
So we've covered a lot of ground. Mutual respect, communication, trust, independence, boundaries, equality, empathy, shared values, flexibility, and conflict resolution.
We have.
We're getting close to the end of those 15 principles.
Wow.
Ready for a few more?
Absolutely. I'm eager to see what other insights the guide has to offer.
This next one is non-negotiable for a healthy relationship. Emotional and physical safety.
Safety is paramount. It's the foundation upon which everything else can be built.
It is.
What does the guide say about creating that sense of safety?
It emphasizes that both partners should feel secure and free from fear, manipulation, or harm in the relationship.
Right.
It's about creating a space where vulnerability and intimacy can flourish.
It's about ensuring both partners feel respected, honored, and cherished, both physically and emotionally.
Exactly. And the guide reminds us this safety encompasses all aspects of the relationship, from physical interactions to emotional expressions.
So how do we cultivate this sense of safety?
The guide suggests a simple practice, regularly checking in with your partner about their needs and boundaries.
Those check-ins are like a relationship lifeline.
They are.
Making sure both partners feel comfortable expressing their needs, setting boundaries, and knowing those boundaries will be respected.
It's about creating an ongoing dialogue about safety and consent.
Yeah.
So both partners feel heard, understood, and protected.
Right.
Now, this next principle might seem obvious,
All right.
but it's so easy to forget the busyness of life, fun, and connection.
The joy of shared experiences, relationships should be a source of happiness,
They should.
not just a to-do list.
Exactly. The guide reminds us that sharing joy, laughter, and meaningful experiences is essential for keeping the spark alive.
And it doesn't have to be extravagant, right?
Not at all. It could be trying a new restaurant, taking a walk in nature, or cuddling up for a movie.
Yeah.
Creating those rituals of connection that bring you closer and remind you why you enjoy being together.
Those shared moments of joy and connection are like deposits in the relationship bank account.
They are.
They build up that reserve of positive energy that helps you weather those inevitable storms.
Okay, 2 more principles to go.
All right.
This next one's about embracing imperfection, patience, and forgiveness.
Those are essential qualities in any relationship.
They are.
We're all human. We're all going to make mistakes.
Exactly. The guide explains patience is about allowing space for those imperfections and learning from those inevitable missteps.
Right.
It's about recognizing growth takes time and effort.
And forgiveness is about letting go of resentment and extending grace.
It is.
Holding on to anger only hurts you in the long run.
It does. And to cultivate these qualities, the guide suggests starting with self-compassion.
Oh, that's good.
Being kind to yourself makes it easier to extend that kindness to others.
It's like creating that inner space of understanding
Yes.
that allows for healing and growth.
And finally, the last principle, awareness of red flags.
Okay.
This is about being proactive and recognizing those potentially unhealthy behaviors early on.
Sometimes we get caught up in the excitement of a new relationship
We do.
and overlook those warning signs. So
Yeah.
how do we stay vigilant?
The guide encourages us to be aware of red flags, like manipulation, jealousy, control, or disrespect. It's about trusting your gut and paying attention to patterns that don't feel right. And addressing those red flags early on is key to preventing long-term harm.
It's about recognizing you deserve to be in a relationship where you feel safe, respected, and valued.
Absolutely. So to sum it all up, we have mutual respect, open communication, trust and honesty, independence, healthy boundaries, equality, empathy, shared values and goals, flexibility and adaptability, conflict resolution skills, emotional and physical safety fun, and connection, patience and forgiveness, and awareness of red flags.
That's quite a mouthful.
It is.
But it paints such a clear picture of what a healthy, thriving relationship can look like.
It does. And remember, it's not about perfection. It's about progress.
It's about those small daily choices that cultivate those loving and supportive connections.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll recap these principles and discuss some key takeaways that can help you apply these insights to your own relationships.
I'm ready to bring it all together and see how this knowledge can help us create those fulfilling and lasting connections we all deserve.
Okay, so we've covered a ton in this deep dive. All those 15 principles of healthy relationships. It's been quite a journey.
It really has, from spotting red flags to building that solid foundation, you know? It feels like we've really gotten into what it takes to make those fulfilling connections happen.
We have. And as we wrap up, I wanted to highlight a few takeaways, things that really stood out to me from this guide.
Okay, I'm all ears. What were some of the biggest aha moments for you?
Well, first off, the emphasis on self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's like before you can even think about a healthy relationship with someone else, you got to understand yourself first.
Right.
Your needs, your values, your boundaries.
Makes total sense. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
If you're not taking care of yourself, honoring your own needs, it's tough to show up, fully authentically for someone else.
Exactly. And the guide even suggests taking time for self-reflection before jumping into a new relationship.
Oh, interest. So valuable.
Yeah.
Really understanding what you're looking for, what you're willing to compromise on. What are those deal breakers?
It's about being intentional, setting yourself up for success.
Absolutely. And another takeaway that hit home for me, communication.
Yeah.
And not just any communication, but that open, honest, vulnerable kind,
Right.
where both people feel safe to express their thoughts and feelings.
We talked about that a lot with those 15 principles, didn't we?
We did.
It's like communication is the key that unlocks all those other principles.
It really is, whether it's boundaries, conflict resolution, or just expressing appreciation and affection. Being able to communicate, well, that's the foundation.
It's not a one-time thing either, is it? It's ongoing, checking in, listening, actively being willing to adapt as things change.
Exactly like those regular check-ins the guide talked about. Making time for those heart-to-heart conversations, even when life gets crazy.
Those check-ins are like taking the pulse of the relationship, Making sure both people feel heard, understood, that their needs are being met. Right. And another thing, recognizing those red flags early on.
We discussed those warning signs, right? Manipulation, control, disrespect, things like that.
Yes. And what I liked about the guide, it didn't just tell us what to look for. It encouraged us to trust our gut.
It's about honoring that voice inside that says, something's not right here.
Exactly. Not being afraid to ask tough questions, set those boundaries, or even walk away if things aren't good.
We deserve to be in relationships that are safe, respectful, fulfilling.
Absolutely. And the guide also emphasized that sometimes getting outside support can be so helpful.
Yeah.
To gain clarity and perspective.
Talking to a friend, a therapist, those organizations that specialize in this.
Right. Having that support system can make all the difference.
It can.
And lastly, one more thing that felt important. Healthy relationships are about progress, not perfection.
That's such a relief to hear. Takes the pressure off, needing to get everything right all the time.
It does. And it recognizes that relationships are a journey. There will be ups and downs, disagreements, miscommunication.
For sure.
What matters is that commitment to learning, growing, and working together to create a dynamic that feels good for both partners.
It's those little everyday choices we make that cultivate those loving and supportive connections.
Exactly. And the guide even suggests focusing on one small step at a time can create big positive change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one small step our listeners can take today to create a safer or more fulfilling relationship, maybe with themselves or with someone else?
I think a great starting point is self-reflection.
Yeah.
Take some time to think about what you need and want in a relationship. What are those non-negotiables for you?
Yeah.
Your boundaries. What brings you joy, makes you feel loved and respected?
Those are great questions to ponder. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. There are resources, support systems, people who care about your well-being. Healthy, fulfilling relationships are possible, and it all starts with that first step.